Thanks for the nice introduction, Angelika. It's nice to be here. Nice conference. Actually, I've never been to stackconf before. It's not huge, but it's really nice content, nice presentations thus far, nice discussions. So I really like to be here. And it was difficult to come here yesterday with all the heavy weather. I had the nice Deutsche Bahn experience in the train from Cologne to here. I guess some people here in the audience share that. Yeah, as you said, the German Ministry for Economy and Climate Action is actually paying for my work. OSBA is my employer. B1 Systems, actually, who asked me to be here today, is one of the members of the OSBA. I guess that's how I can explain the connection. Slides are available as PDF. You can scan the code and download if you like. I also learned that I can upload them to the conference site. I will do that later. Haven't done that yet. Just introducing myself. I've been doing open source pretty much all of my professional life. Before that, I'm a trained physicist, but then IT was basically all of my professional life. Contributing to Linux, the GNU compiler, projects like OpenStack, our own sovereign cloud stack project, Kubernetes cluster API, are those pieces where I occasionally provide some code. Most of my work is not coding, obviously, just working with people, with partners, trying to make sure they contribute to our projects, but I still like touching code, and from time to time I do that. And yes, I've been doing this for a number of companies, been with SUSE for a very long time, so those folks that came from the Nuremberg region, I heard a lot of people from there. I've lived there for a while and been with Deutsche Telekom, T-Systems, and now OSB Alliance, which is fun, and also been part of a number of associations like the Electronic Frontier Foundation. I'm not sure they are as active and important any longer as they were once, but they are fighting for your online freedom rights, still a good thing to do. Also in the Open Infrastructure Foundations Board, OSB Alliance. I've been a member actually there before they hired me for this project, so that's how it all fits together. So open source, I see the titles are a bit broken. No, never mind. So this is really why I'm doing open source. And there's kind of a philosophical motivation behind that, because IT is getting stronger and stronger, basically giving us in our personal lives, in our professional lives, opportunities, and it's getting, yeah, I mean, the more time moves forward, the more IT influences our lives. So I thought it's probably good if that is not in the control of a small number of large companies, but if it's in the hands of many people and the civil society actually has a say in how this all works. So I was actually thrilled to learn about these ideas about free software and the 4 freedoms that are, I think, still well written by the FSF, to run code for whatever you want to use it for, to study that code, to change it if you want, to distribute it as is, or to change it and then distribute your changed versions. And I think that is really still fundamental, what gives us freedom in how we use software and how we can use IT. I think the other thing, which is not so much philosophical but really practical, it is a really nice experience to work with smart people all over the world and build really cool software. So I think the collaborative approach to building software is really very successful. And I think that's been copied also, meanwhile, by a lot of companies that kind of try to do proprietary software, but then they try at least internally to kind of have some way of collaborative software building that kind of reflects a bit how the open source world works. Inner source approach, sometimes they're calling it. So this is good, and in some way it's been extremely successful. I mean, we started to do this Linux thing in the 90s. I was there rather early. And there was always this saying of, well, world domination that we want to achieve. And I don't think that was really meant very seriously. But if you look at where Linux is today, it's pretty close to that, actually. I mean, everybody uses Linux. If she or he wants to do so or not. I mean, your router at home is, your TV likely, your smartphone, if it's not Apple, but if it's Apple, it's BSD. There's a lot of open source in there as well. So in some way, you don't get around to that. And same thing if you're a software developer. It's very hard to do software development efficiently these days without losing a lot of open source. Just we look at what you find in GitHub, and then the tools used from there, the components, the libraries, the workflows. It's hard to avoid that. So in some way, we have been extremely successful with this idea that we could actually do things differently and for free, and actually compete with the large companies that do proprietary software. So everything's great, almost. So there's a few question marks if you look at that. Obviously, companies that build proprietary software can take the open source projects that we work on. Hopefully, most of us work on them as a paid job these days. I think that the times where most people are doing it in their spare time are over. But still, companies can take the code that you produce, that you want to contribute to the open source world, and they can build proprietary software from that again. At least if your code is under a permissive license, because that's what permissive licenses do allow. And we're seeing that companies take a lot of open source software and then build something proprietary from that and build these walled gardens, which is a pity. And if you combine some of these open source projects into large platforms, actually, it's a lot of work to do only that integration and combination work. And if you look at what, for example, whatever, Amazon Web Services, maybe the largest platform out there does, there's 90-something% open source in there. And still, the overall result is a proprietary platform. You cannot take it and rebuild it at home. You cannot, even if you own a data set, you cannot do that, because there are proprietary pieces in there and they don't publish the way they're doing it. So you cannot replicate it. You cannot say, I want to have something like Amazon, improve it and then use it for my own purpose in my own data center. That's not possible. Yet, I mean, those platforms have strong, what economists would call network effects, or what in IT we typically use the term platform effects or ecosystem effects, where if you're successful, you become more attractive for software developers. Because you have more software, you become more attractive for users. Because you have more users, the software developers tend to move there again. So it's this virtuous circle that reinforces winner takes it all scenarios. So we're seeing these large platforms, and unfortunately, they are not open. And another sign of warnings is that we have these companies like Mongo, Elastic, HashiCorp, which do really nice software, but they once used clean open source OSI compliant licenses, and they no longer do that. And one of the reasons is that they see how these large platforms take their software, build a proprietary service on top of that, and be rather successful with that. And taking some of the investment that those open source companies would like to have gotten back, they don't get they don't get to make the money they would like to grow. So we see this unfortunate trend of using non-OSI compliant licenses to compete with large platforms. I don't think that is the right answer. I really don't think so. I think Frank, is he still here? No, he's not. Got it right. He's using the GPL and AGPL to actually protect Nextcloud from being taken by the large platforms as a service without them having to contribute back. So they could still take it, but they would have to contribute back if they change something, if they do integration work. So he hasn't faced that problem. And I think that would have been my answer to Mongo and Elastic. Why don't you take that same approach and still have a very clean open source product that people that want to use the full open source version can still take? So we'll see how that plays out. Final point, we see some open washing. There are people, the companies using the term open source when they don't really mean it. You see companies using open core models where then some of the code is open, but if you really want to use the features that you need to pay for the extras. Or where you have open source code base, but then the whole development process is such that you cannot really contribute to that. You cannot really shape and influence and get things that you need into the code. So not everything's great. And there's been some discussions whether it's enough to have open source, and there are some dangers that I think that have been discussed. Traditionally, software patents, I think, was a debate we've had for a very long time in the open source world, that they are a danger to take away some of the rights that we actually want to have when we write open source software. So that is something that is still there. It's still a danger. I have not heard it debated as much recently as it used to happen. Maybe the fact that there is some language in the Apache license and also the GPL3 license to address that has helped a bit. But we don't know. I mean, we don't know. There's also an upcoming danger in Europe with the Cyber Resilience Act. Companies that do open source and build a business on that will have rather significant duties to carry, which could be really a significant burden. I mean, taking responsibility for the security of a large open source stack that you deliver and just want to provide some service on can be rather burdensome and may actually change the economics of open source. So that's an ongoing debate at the European policy level, and there are some exceptions for open source which are probably insufficient the way they're written today, but this is an important debate. The one thing I think I mentioned with companies that have open source but not really allow others to contribute, that's a problem. Traditionally, if you have like an open source project and the persons that run it, the maintainers, don't do a good job allowing other people to contribute, you just fork it. And if you are successful, you are able to gain a significant developer base. Obviously, you can run with that, and open source has then protected you. But I mean, if we're honest, this is not a very efficient process. I mean, in the end, we fragment the open source community into many small pieces if we do a lot of forking. So it would be much better to have the ability to contribute and influence the proper main project without the need to fork it. It's good to have that possibility to fork it because that kind of forces people to behave well. But it can become rather unrealistic. So I mean, I'm part of a community, the open infrastructure community, where the 4 opens have been defined that kind of try to cover those aspects, that not just you want to have fully open source code, but also an open development process, an open community, and an open design and decision-taking process. And that's something that is important, that helps. And then maybe the final point, if you have a complex, large system of open source code, and you build a platform from that, and you want to operate that platform, that actually can be extremely hard. It can be a lot harder than actually putting the code together and integrating it. And we have not yet been as successful sharing knowledge and sharing best practices, how to operate complex systems. We have not extended our open source culture to apply it to the operations piece of software as much yet. Despite this DevOps thinking, we just, I think, need to take the next step. One of the initiatives I'm involved in, which our community is involved in because it's important for us, is the Open Operations Initiative, where we actually try to build that and actively share knowledge and build the right approach to do that. So I would say the openness question of the 2020s is not so much, is my single project clean open source? Well, that is important. That is a prerequisite to contribute to a better, more open world. But in the end, the success is actually determined by, actually, are we also as an open source community or as multiple open source community successful integrating many of these projects into coherent platforms that can compete with the walled gardens, the proprietary platforms try to build. So it's much more a platform game question these days than just single. I mean, I could each day I could look back at when I started contributing to Linux and enjoy how great this operating system has become and the ecosystem around it has become, and at the same time I observe also every day that it's been used in ways that don't help freedom, that don't help IT to become less dependent on a few large companies. So I think that's the interesting question. Can we also, as open source communities, come together and build platforms where we integrate a lot of open source projects and do that at least as good as the proprietary vendors do it? And that is a bit the digital sovereignty debate we are seeing here. So where if you're using platforms for your infrastructure platforms and you think about, do I have control over my IT? It's not just the legal compliance things. I mean, obviously that's something you need to do. You need to be complying with the law. But you want to have choice. And in order to have choice, obviously, it doesn't help you to have choice between Azure, Amazon, and Google, and maybe Alibaba. Because once you've chosen one of them, you cannot change anymore. And choice is only a choice that you take you cannot take just once, but you want to have the choice that after you've taken such a decision and then your platform doesn't fulfill your needs anymore, maybe the vendor has just become expensive or bad or moves a different direction or is being picked up by the wrong company, you can change still without having huge switching costs by redoing all your automation. So that requires that for a user of the platform, different platforms exist that are very, very compatible to it. So you don't need to change all your code, all your automation. In-sourcing option obviously is something that always should be there, even if as a small company you will not make use of that very often. But I think it keeps the vendors honest. And it is the last resort that you still have. I mean, or if you're a large company, actually it might be realistic. If you have a capable IT department, why not run your own platform? It's not that hard. I've seen large companies fail, but I've also seen medium-sized companies being very successful. So it's definitely possible, and our partners do that. In the end, you want to also be able to shape technology. You want to have the ability to have innovation, not just at the software as a service level layer, but also have innovation all the way down to the infrastructure. And that, of course, requires that you can influence and contribute technology all the way down in your stack. And in the end, it's a question, and I don't think every user of a platform wants to learn details, how these platforms work internally, but you want to have the ability to do so if that is a requirement you have. You want to have the ability to build your own skills and transparency and decide on your own, do I want to rely on knowledge that I buy, or do I want to invest in my employees that have their own knowledge, and I don't need then the full support service package from vendors. That's a choice you want to be able to make. So this is us, our vision as Sovereign Cloud Stack. We want to build one platform. One, not many, but we standardize it together as a community. We build it together, and then many operators can run it. Companies, small, medium, large, internal as their own private cloud, for their limited set of customers as a community cloud or as a public cloud provider. And all of that is part of our ecosystem. We have examples for all of this. So the statement here says, well, Sovereign Cloud Stack, we built a network to create a virtual hyperscaler. Virtual hyperscaler is not like the real hyperscalers where you have like one company being in control of a lot of setups that are run in different regions, and the technology is fully controlled by that one entity. But the idea is really that we build open software, open standards together, and then many companies can actually operate their own environments, but all of those environments, they can actually be federated to become like a large virtual cloud, like a large virtual container management platform. Fully open source and supported by sharing knowledge in the Open Operations Initiative. So these are the three things we deliver that we want to provide to our stakeholders. We create the standards. That is actually what provides to the users the ability to switch between all of the different operators that operate SCS compliant platforms. We create a complete modular open source implementation of that, and that goes of course, and of course that implementation implements all the standards, and it also informs the standard development process. So this goes hand in hand. And then also make all the operational knowledge available that you need to run this in a very reliable way. So this is the Open Operations Initiative, sharing knowledge, sharing status, sharing challenges, because that's how you learn. And if there are issues, you actually share the root cause analysis publicly. It takes some courage to do so, because there's company cultures that say, well, we have zero outages, we don't make mistakes. I see someone laughing who has heard that term before. That is, of course, an error culture that doesn't allow for learning and sharing that knowledge. But I think it is the challenges when you learn most. And it takes some courage, but I think we've been rather successful in building up this culture inside our community. I'll skip the sovereignty taxonomy to make sure we come to our evening event in time. So putting this into reality, so we actually have been involved in a few discussions when GAIAX started, and I think at the early GAIAX days, a lot of people expected that GAIAX would kind of deliver, well, some people actually, I think, called it the cloud Airbus. Thinking back to when the European Union came together and countries kind of agreed that there needs to be a second provider of airplanes in the world, and then Airbus was built. And some people had that expectation that GAIAX would do that. It was never the intention. But we're still, and we kind of had some discussions with the people in the ministry, or really smart people, by the way. What will be done on the infrastructure side? And they said, well, this is not kind of the core of what GAIAX does, but we very much see that such an initiative would enhance GAIAX by also having the transparency and the federation at the infrastructure platform layer. So we are very supportive of our ideas that something needs to be done there. And we actually have been lucky to write a proposal and actually receiving a grant from the German ministry. And that's what's paying me now. It's paying for almost a dozen people in my team. And we also have some money to pay for development effort from our partners. So that's working out nicely. And we have a rather active community. 40, I think, is an old number. It's more like 50 active members these days that contribute to the code. Some of them paid for, some of them just because it's interesting to their employer and company. We try to do publications, present at events, because I think the more people join us and help us to make this successful, the better. We have just yesterday launched the SCS public cloud that is using the SCS software, the SCS reference implementation. That one is Codex. They are on the slide. They are not yet on our web page, so if you check, you will not find them yet, but that is, it will probably change later this week. Those are 6. Then there's a few private cloud installations. I think the largest one is the one in Thüringen, in the Landesrechenzentrum, where the B1 Systems folks are actually doing all of the integration work. We have a large Dutch company, which I'm not allowed to mention, but they have a significant deployment, and there's a few more upcoming, so news on that will become visible on our news page over the time. We also have a couple of integration partners like B1 Systems, Stack Experts from Bautzen. Domination is a company from Slovakia. SCS, a small container focused company from, I think they are incorporated in Bonn. They are really skilled and can provide support. So we as a project try to support our partners, but in the end it's the integration partners that do the work of setting these environments up, of course. We have had 5 releases already. The 6th one is due next week. Just maybe to also kind of describe the roles in our ecosystem. So as the project at the Open Source Business Alliance, we kind of orchestrate and coordinate all the work. We do a bit of development work ourselves, but the main work is really coordinating the development efforts from our partners. Obviously, a lot of upstream community work that's happening from the various foundations, CNCF, OIF, also the classical open source vendors that do great work. And then the integration partners, training partners, support partners like B1 Systems, providing services to build environments, providing support, of course, with our kind of back-end support behind them. And then the operators at the layer above, which really run clouds and container environments based on SCS standards and SCS technology. We do provide transparency over what our partners do. So we have compliance checks. Those are run every night as a GitHub job currently. Just when I put this page together a few hours ago, I saw that WaveStack is failing, which I was surprised to see because they have been running well the last couple weeks, and I haven't had the chance yet to look into that. I'm sure they have already seen that and are probably working on that, and if not, I will ping them. There's another thing on this page. This is our public documentation page, by the way, so visible to everyone. There's also links to Health Monitor, so we are also monitoring whether those clouds are running well. I've actually taken an example here from a cloud that currently has problems. All the API calls succeed except for 2. This is like a 24-hour window with 25,000 API calls happening. But from the 1938 virtual machines they built, 54 have not been reachable, which is not great. So they have to look into that, and they already are working on that. Probably an issue with their metadata service. Just my educated guess. So I expect they will fix that, but I mean that's something that our partners can see and that we can see, and that's actually even transparent to the users. So if some user is kind of deploying something and wondering why something doesn't work, he could actually look at the Health Monitor and see, okay, there is currently a challenge, and I should expect 1 out of whatever 30 VMs to somehow fail to get their SSH key injected. We also measure performance of API network compute. It's just below the line of the screenshot I have here. So this is what the platform looks like. Classical open source stack you would build if you want to have a cloud and container infrastructure. So virtualization for storage, network, and compute with Linux KVM, Ceph, OVN. the open stack services core, basically only the core services we are using here, expose that as an infrastructure platform, and then we put container clusters on top of that using Kubernetes Cluster API, and we have some automation around it to make sure the node images all work, security groups are configured, storage is available, metric service works, resource limits are set, and to make sure this is a high quality Kubernetes cluster that comes out of that. And then on top of that, you could run, for example, the federation services from the GAIAX project. They actually have developed it on this platform. So it works well on our platform. And then identity access management is kind of a central pillar, and operational tooling as well. They go across the stack. We're trying to use the same federated users with our identity management system across the layers. Release 5 upcoming next week. I will probably skip this one to not run over time too much and get angry looks. And we will have a press release next week anyway for our release, so that's great. Just a link to our homepage, scs.community, the docs page. All code, of course, available on GitHub, Sovereign Cloud Stack. Plus, of course, a lot of the upstream projects that are that we're using and consuming. There's an open operations page, and yes, we have some articles collected on our news page, recordings from talks. And I just want to close with inviting you to join us and work with us, contribute to open source, contribute to a world where we kind of build platforms, stacks together that can compete and that developers do actually like and love and that people want to use. Thanks.
Thank you, Kurt, for this interesting talk. Are there any questions? We still have time. Who had the initial idea to do all this?
There was a good question, interesting event actually, because it was a discussion with a person I knew from my professional life, who is now the director of the Federal Agency of Disruptive Innovation, the Bundesagentur für Sprunginnovation. And he actually called a few folks together. He said, yes, we really need to inject something into GAIAX to make it worthwhile. And then the Peter Gunn from the OSBA, who is now hosting this project, he was joining in, and we had discussions. Okay, let's see whether the BMWK was still very much running GAIAX at the time, is actually willing to amend GAIAX to actually build something in the cloud infrastructure area as well. And that was a very successful conversation. And I mean, to my big surprise, we thought we need to explain why open source is important for the digital sovereignty that GAIAX wants to achieve, and we didn't have to have that conversation. They really understand this very well. They have smart people there. And maybe it was just me not expecting that, but it was a really good experience.
Thanks.
Thanks.